heart breaks for those 17 children that died as a result of a vicious, mad killer that went on to that school campus. The Florida legislature is in session, and as I understand, certainly has an interest in modifying the laws, and the Florida legislature and the governor needs your support right now. There's no one answer to this issue, but there certainly is processes and protocols that can reduce the probabilities of an event occurring. And if an event occurs, as horrific as it is, there are systems and processes we can put in place to either eliminate or mitigate the damage. Certainly there needs to be more teacher training, more hardening of the targets, the schools. There needs to be stronger teeth in the Baker Act, the mental health evaluation system. Currently, the law says if we think someone is a threat to themselves or others, then we can pick them up, take them to a receiving facility where they can be held up to 72 hours for mental health evaluation. That's not enough. As we have seen in the past around this state and around this nation, we can see some very frightening writings, some very frightening photographs, some very frightening text, but it doesn't rise to the level of a threat. And if we hear about this and we go there, we're not able to do an intervention with an arrest or a mental health, the Baker Act, if they don't show that they're an imminent threat to themselves or others. We need more teeth in the Baker Act. So when we find these people that we're really worried about, we can get them the help up front. That's important. But for the sake of argument, let's look at where we are now. There are interventions. There is training. There is hardening of some of the schools. And we talked about how those things need to be improved upon. But the question is, what do we do when the active shooter shows up? And what I'm suggesting to you is not something that we want to do, but something we have to do. And here's what we have already done in this county with our Sentinel program, and I'm not suggesting that's the only program. We know, the data tells us, that when the crazed madman arrives on campus with a gun, with murder in his eyes, that the deed is usually completed within 2 to 5 minutes. And in Broward County, it was 3 minutes. We know that the police response is going to be a plus 5 minutes. 911 doesn't work. When we get the 911 call, the shooter is there committing the evil deed. So, what do we do? One solution is that you go to the school staff and you seek out those that will agree to be sentinels on the campus, and call them what you want, guardians on the campus that will protect the children. You select them, you provide detailed background investigations, you provide detailed psychological evaluations, then you give them training like we do in our program. We require more firearms hours of training than even the police academy requires for you to be a certified police officer in Florida. We require them to train and qualify at a higher percentage than even the police academy standards in the state of Florida require. Then you allow them to carry a concealed firearm. And you don't have one, and you don't have two, but you have 3, 4, 5 on the campus. So God forbid that horrible day ever occur, that you have a group of people armed with guns that run to the threat to neutralize it before they harm our children, ideally, or even if their shooting starts, you mitigate it. Now, I hear some that go, we don't want to do that. Well, okay, Einstein, you got a better idea? Do you have a better idea of how to stop a crazed, mad person armed with a gun charging a campus with the plan in place to kill children? Well, no. They got an opinion. They run their mouth. Talk's cheap. I got a plan. The Florida legislature is concerned. I talked to the governor. He's concerned and is working toward a solution. I talked to several legislators. They are going to put forth solutions. The Sentinel program, as we have it, is not the complete plan. The Sentinel program is the last best solution when the shooter shows up, when everything else has failed. And I ask you this. For me, it's not a heavy lift. What would you want to happen if your child was in the line of fire? Would you want a teacher that was very well selected and trained to have a gun to protect your child? Or a janitor? Or a school administrator? Or a deputy sheriff? Or a police officer? You don't care. I don't care. My grandbabies are on these campuses. And your children are on these campuses, and your grandchildren are on these campuses, and we have an obligation to protect them. There's going to be another active shooter on a school campus, whether that's elementary, junior, middle school, high school, or college. There's going to be another one someplace in this country. And Florida has the ability to show the leadership, to show that we are willing to take the responsibility for looking out for the best interests of our children. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be a horrible day to have a shootout with an active shooter on one of our campuses with our children running around. It would be a worse day for the active shooter to be able to shoot and kill and shoot and kill, and we're not able to protect the children. And that's where we are right now. I don't want to hear about all this rhetoric about gun control. That's another argument for another day. We have gun control on the campuses in the state of Florida. It says nobody possesses a gun except a law enforcement officer. That's gun control. How did that work in Broward County? It didn't, because only the good people didn't have a gun on the campus that day. Only the law-abiding people didn't have a gun on the campus that day. The criminal's going to show up with a gun, whether he buys it legally, or he steals it, or he buys it off of the street. There are millions and millions and millions and millions of guns in this country. So let's save the gun control argument for another day, and let's focus on what we're going to do today when everything else fails to protect our children and keep them from dying. And that's whether it's at a school, in a business, in a church. Do you know, in a church, in a business, we're good to go, because business people can allow guns and train. Churches can allow guns and training. I have authorized my team, which is simply the best in the nation, since the shooting in Texas at the church, we've probably trained between 500 and 1,000 people and prepped them to protect their church or their business. So while you can protect your church, you can protect your business, you can protect your home, you can't protect your schools. That's pretty crazy. It's up to us to act. I have the program in place. Southeastern College is on board. We are working with and signing the contracts for another private college. And I've had several private schools call me and say, how do we do this? It's time for all the people in the state of Florida to say, okay, we'll have the other discussions later, but let's give the law enforcement officers the Baker Act tools when we suspect somebody can be dangerous to get them help. And then let's have a program, a Sentinel program, so that we can keep the kids safe or do our best to protect the kids when all else fails. Any other questions?